Hello, I am Merryana Salem, aka Mary. I am a Lebanese-Aboriginal bisexual woman.
Hello, I'm Durr-e Adan Haque, aka Dea or Dee. I'm an Indonesian-Pakistani non-binary lesbian.
We are two writers who love movies, television, and books, especially when they're gay.
And welcome to GayV Club, where we will be analysing LGBT texts
that we like, that we don't like, and how we relate to these texts as gay people of colour.
So for our first episode, we wanted to talk about the 2019 TV show Good Omens, specifically the characters Crowley and Aziraphale.
Just to recap, Good Omens is a series based off the 1990 novel Good Omens, or The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter by Neil Gaiman and Sir Terry Pratchett. It stars David Tennant and Michael Sheen as Crowley and Aziraphale, who are respectively a demon and an angel who have been secret best friends for 6,000 years, but have accidentally misplaced the Antichrist and are racing around London trying to prevent Armageddon and a war that's been brewing since time began.
This was a video essay that we've been wanting to make for a while, but we don't have time as we're both full-time uni students.
Nope.
Some of the questions that we wanted to ask today about the relationship between Crowley and Aziraphale are, is it subtext? Is it queerbaiting? How can it be both?
How is the relationship in the show different to the novel? As in, how is it gayer or not as gay? And does it elevate the relationship? Obviously, we're going to look at what Neil Gaiman has said and what the actors think, and the testimonials of how they wrote and played the characters in general.
We also wanted to look at the general marketing of the show and the relationship, how subtext and ambiguity has been used for their advantage, and whether that's fair to LGBT audiences.
Also, side note, if you hear D or I saying the word Kraz throughout the episode, that is our quick shorthand to refer to Crowley and Aziraphale as a ship, because we are Australian and are therefore inherently too lazy to say ineffable husbands every time.
Yeah, sometimes also we may say as to refer to Aziraphale.
Yeah, I don't know, I've seen a lot of people refer to him as Azira, which I just feel like is also an effort.
Yeah.
Because it's like 3 syllables.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We'd be godfathers, sort of. Overseeing his upbringing. We do it right, he won't be evil. All good, he'll just be normal.
It might work. Godfathers. Well, I'll be damned.
It's not that bad when you get used to it.
So, is it subtext or is it queerbaiting? What's the difference between these two things?
So subtext is an underlying theme that is conveyed throughout a text. Queerbaiting is a form of gay subtext. It's a much more deliberate technique that's been popularized in more recent media of this century because it plays into the idea of fandom and like people who ship gay relationships in media, which are never actually canonized in the text themselves.
Yeah. Like the way
Or rarely canonized.
Yeah. Like, the way I think of it is almost all queerbaiting is subtext, but not all subtext is queerbaiting. Subtext is the general term for things that are happening underneath what's explicitly said, like what can be implied and what can be inferred.
Yeah, and also historically, like, gay subtext was the only way that these relationships could be represented in literature or film, because obviously it wouldn't have been allowed, like, either due to censorship or caused by homophobia.
It's kind of actually... I don't know, sometimes I find shipping like a condescending or just like a sad way.
Yeah, it's much more than that.
Because, a lot of people say like shipping isn't activism, like you see that on Tumblr all the time or even on Twitter, but for a lot of time it was like a form of rebellion, like a way of reading a text for queer people.
It's just like a general way for us to engage with the text by like trying to identify ourselves within it or like inserting ourselves into a story because no one will tell it for us.
I do think queerbaiting has a more cynical edge to it though, just because like I find that it's when people, usually non-LGBT people, are writing to exploit that desire from us to see ourselves. They want to encourage that level of engagement because obviously it makes them more money.
Yeah, and because it's just not generally done with any good intentions other than for capital gain. And it isn't just gay people who they want to engage either, because, unfortunately in fandom there are a lot of like straight women who fetishize gay relationships between men especially, who the writers want to appeal to.
We see you, and we don't like you.
Please drop off the face of the earth.
What's a solid recent example for our audience of pure queer baiting. Good Omens aside, what's something you can point to that's definitely queer baiting?
We don't like to say the S word, so I'm only going to say it once. Sherlock, the 2010 BBC
the BBC
adaptation
series.
specifically. There's also Hannibal. What else is there? Merlin. Just for some variety, because sometimes it can happen with women as well. Grace and Frankie.
So that's queer baiting, and that's subtext. So then, given those things, what's queer coding?
So queer coding is used in both queer subtext and queer baiting, where certain characteristics or behaviors that we associate with being queer,
or have been associated with being queer by society.
Yeah, they've been established that way. These characteristics or behaviors or idiosyncrasies that often they have a negative connotations due to homophobia and just general traditional ideas of gender and how gender should be performed and what gay people get wrong about that. So to code a character with these various characteristics or behaviors, it's been used to imply that these characters are gay without having to explicitly say it.
Queer coding is a way of making characters gay without actually having them say it out loud.
Not making them gay.
Not making them gay, but portraying them as gay, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, just without having them to say it out loud.
Yeah, it's a way of signaling.
Or have anyone else say it out loud, but there's often ways that they do that anyway.
Yeah. But that's part of queer coding, yeah.
I do hope I didn't do the wrong thing.
Oh, you're an angel. I don't think you can do the wrong thing.
Thank you. Oh, it's been bothering me.
I've been worrying too. What if I did the right thing with the whole eat the apple business? Demon can get into a lot of trouble for doing the right thing. It'd be funny if we both got it wrong, eh? If I did the good thing and you did the bad one.
All right, let's talk about our boys.
Our boys.
The boys.
So, in Good Omens, several aspects about Aziraphale and Crowley's relationship are undeniably queer-coded. There's the 6,000 years of partnership, the clandestine meetings, the excruciatingly slow progress of them admitting what they mean to each other. You go too fast for me.
Don't.
The way Crowley calls him Angel, and other endearments. Also, just the religious rebellion of an angel and a demon being intimate friends. Is there anything more gay than religious rebellion?
But also, with Kraz, even though that's obviously how the relationship's been framed, the characters themselves, as individuals, are queer-coded in many ways. For instance, my boy Crowley, he's a diehard Queen fan. He wears a different wig and pair of sunglasses, every era, and, he walks like that. Or is that just how David Tennant walks? I think it's a character choice, don't you?
It's a very queer-coded walk.
It's a very queer-coded walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. His rank as a fallen angel, now a demon of temptation, which is associated with sin, which is associated with deviancy, which we all know people to this day still associate that with. Look, it all supports that his sexuality would be anything but biblically approved. Also, there's ultimately the double standard where basically if you saw, absolutely if people saw a man and a woman behaving the way that Crowley and Az do in
doing what they do in this series.
Yeah, doing what they do in the series.
With no difference at all other than...
Yeah, we just supplant Crowley and Az for, some A-grade heteros, and no one would dispute or question whether or not they were in love or whether or not they were a couple, which I think is the most basic argument you can give for them.
It's the heteronormativity.
Yeah.
Aziraphale, on the other hand, is a timid, mild-mannered, effeminate angel who owns an antique bookshop. He's a regular at discreet gentlemen's clubs and his juxtaposition to Crowley and his cautious hesitation can be read as classic gay repression. As is
Amen.
just, he's much more frightened than Crowley, or he comes across as more frightened than Crowley about heaven and hell, finding out about their relationship, which, you know, it brings us to the forbidden love aspect of Kraz as well.
Yes.
What's gayer than forbidden love? Yeah.
Literally nothing.
That's the answer
like
to
that
my
is
religious rebellion question.
But literally, like, there's nothing gay. Like, I don't understand why heteros think they have, like, a monopoly on forbidden love.
No, like, yeah.
You know,
they have no real source of drama.
I'm not an
Yeah.
idiot, Crowley. Do you know what trouble I'd be in if they knew I'd been fraternizing? It's completely out of the question.
Fraternizing?
Well, whatever you wish to call it. I do not think there is any point in discussing it further.
I have lots of other people to fraternize with, Angel.
Of course you do.
I don't need you.
Well, and the feeling is mutual.
So this is an adaptation of a novel, obviously, and I don't think we can talk about the TV series before we talk about the OG text, which was written by Sir Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. I think it's important to mention, though, that obviously Neil is the one that wrote the adaptation because Sir Terry is no longer with us. This was a co-written story whose adaptation had essentially one person running it, like, as well as obviously Neil having influences, like from Amazon and BBC who produced it.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of this novel, as you know. I've been a huge fan of this novel for a very long time. It was one of the first things I read where I thought about, you know, like when I was 16, I thought, oh man, they could be in love. They could be gay. It was very much like, oh my goodness, like. Anyway, yeah.
You saw that subtext.
Yeah, I saw the subtext. Like, I really did. Like, there was the interesting thing I remember reading it was thinking like, but there's nothing in the book that really confirms it. And it took me a long time reading Good Omens as I got older. And also like watching a lot more of like gay media, like in general. But as I got older, I realized like, you know, you don't really need to see something, like you don't really need something to be confirmed for you to believe that it's there.
More of that later.
Yes, more of that later. But the way I feel like Crowley and Az are portrayed in the book is very matter of fact compared to how they are in the show. Like you don't get much backstory in the book. You don't get that whole beautiful like sequence in Hard Times.
Episode 3.
The Holy Grail. When you see them throughout history. Like there are some flashbacks, you know, for instance in the Garden of Eden. Like the way the show starts with the scene of them in the garden is exactly the way the book starts. I remember like when I watched the first episode of Good Omens, I was like freaking out. I was like, this is it. But throughout time you don't get that same backstory. So the book, they're just presented like, yeah, they go out to dinners, they have nights together, like where they're just drinking and hanging out. They spend a lot of time together in their secret little context.
They like go to concerts together.
I know, they go like,
that's really cute.
They do all this stuff, like, you know, I feel like in the book it's very much like, we're gay, keep moving, like, you know, it's not...
Keep scrolling.
But the show, actually, I think, added much more to the backstory. Like, the big thing I think that changed for me the way the relationship is portrayed in the book, and I don't know, maybe if you agree with me on this, but in the book it's presented as something that is already fully evolved. You know, like the relationship is fully there and established, whereas the show took the angle of like, no, they still have things, you know, capital T things that they
stuff to do, Laurie.
Stuff to do, Laurie. Thanks. Why are we quoting The Walking Dead?
I'm sorry, I've never seen The Walking Dead.
I know, like anyway.
Why did I do that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway,
go.
Anyway, but yeah, the relationship is fully there. Like, you know, but in the show it's like they still have stuff that they need to deal with and they haven't talked about. So it's very much like, you know, I also think there's a lot of stuff I've seen in the fandom as well, because you see a lot of people writing fics like, oh, they didn't have their first kiss until after the Armageddon happened, and it's just really odd to me because I can't imagine, like, all respect to those people, like, I've read some very cute, like, post-Armageddon fics that are lovely, but, like, it's really odd to me because I can't imagine in 6,000 years, like, they've never kissed each other, like
once.
Not even once, you know, that's really, I mean, it's cute that people write those fics, but in the book, it's presented as a very much fully evolved, and the Armageddon happens and they're just still there. Like, I feel like Crowley and Aziraphale remain friends no matter what, and they're still together no matter what. Whereas in the show, it's like Armageddon really pushes them, it almost like make their relationship public.
To come out.
Yeah, because they have to, they kind of have to when the battle starts, like between heaven and hell.
Yeah, I only read the novel for the first time at the start of this year, and I basically agree, because my first impressions while reading it was like, when, like, I was thinking like either like, when are Az and Crowley going to smash?
Yeah!
Or like, are we just supposed to assume that they've been doing it on the regular for the last 6,000 years?
But that's how it's written, like they've been doing it on the reg.
It's just like, yeah, it's very matter of fact,
Yeah, like, yes, this is them, this is they, keep scrolling.
But yeah, like, to me, especially, I think just it was the fact that those characters in the novel were actually subjected to quite a lot of homophobia. Like, it's quite sad, but that's what made me assume that that's what they were.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of references. Doesn't the Witchfinder guy call Aziraphale a lot of homophobic slurs in the book, and even in the show too, but in the book?
Yeah, in the book it's more overt, but like there's also that whole encounter with Anathema where like at first she's very wary or like frightened of these two strange men until she hears Crowley call as Angel, and then like she hears him calling as an endearment and she realizes, oh, nothing to worry about.
Yeah, like,
and the subtext is that she assumes that they're gay.
yeah, oh, it's fine, they're gay, like that is supposed to be the joke.
Should it be the joke though?
No. Like, gross jokes aside, but do you think the book required them to grow as much? Like, I feel like the TV series went to great pains to be like, their relationship is still evolving, even now.
Yeah, like, that's because in the TV series, like, the relationship of Kraz is the heart of the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in the book, they're only there for maybe 20% of the whole thing. So, like, mostly in the beginning and then at the very end, and the middle is too occupied with all the other characters.
They definitely have a more active role in the series than they do in the book. Like, while the book places Kraz as just being, two or more players, like, in the ineffable game of Armageddon.
Yep.
The series makes a more visible effort to make their relationship the emotional anchor of the story, with Kraz not only having the majority of their book scenes included in the adaptation, but also, like, some extra bits. I just feel like the TV show, like, does make that effort because it fleshes out their 6,000-year-old friendship beyond the scope of the immediate Armageddon plot.
Yeah, there's more stuff.
Yeah. Like, in the book, all they really do is misplace the Antichrist, and they spend a lot of the book thinking, we did it, whoops.
Yeah, like, they fuck up, and then they spend a lot of the book just drinking and, like, wondering, like, oh no, what are we going to do? But, like, they don't actually do anything, and I honestly can't think of anything else that
like,
they do.
No, but they really don't do a lot. Like, the whole middle of the story is just them going like, oh, we messed up.
Yeah, then they just show up at the end.
I think it's interesting, though, like, a big difference, I think, is in the show when Aziraphale, quote-unquote, dies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when Crowley thinks Aziraphale is dead. Like, in the book, he's very like, okay, I may as well just go sit in a bar and, wait out Armageddon. I wouldn't say casually, but he doesn't react as intensely in the book.
Yeah, like, that's because you don't hear Somebody to Love by Queen playing in the background when you're reading that section of the story.
Do you remember when you watched that scene with me and I was like crying? That's my song, man. That's my song.
Like, honestly, the first time I watched the series, it took me like a week to get through, and then I wasn't too attached to it. But when I rewatched it with Mary, who has been a big fan of the book like for several years, like, that just made me really love it.
Aww. It was just so much gayer.
It was.
I was so happy, which is the bottom line that I'm trying to get at. Like, the show, I felt, as someone who was a fan of the book, was very much more explicit, like, in the nature of Crowley and Aziraphale's relationship, like, that they are romantically involved. That being said, though, I don't think it was as explicit as it could have been portraying that, but it was still much more obvious in the show than it was in the book, and that's very much because we get all that extra content. Oh, and and also, the other extra content that I forgot to mention is the end Like, obviously, where the book ends, it's more or less the Armageddon sequence that you see in the show. Maybe a bit after with them at the Ritz, but you don't hear about those consequences that Az and Crowley have to face because of their actions. Like, you don't learn how they're dealt with by heaven and hell. They just sort of talk about it like, yeah, it'll probably be pretty bad, but they don't really care. Like, they don't really care, because as long as they're together, it doesn't matter. But in the show, that is a very specific thing. It's almost an epilogue for what happens, like for what happens to them now.
Literally the last half of the finale.
Yeah, like, almost the whole finale is framed around what happens to them. Like, it's not so much framed around overcoming Armageddon, it's literally just framed around what happens to them.
Yeah, that's because the episode opens with David Tennant walking into hell, but he's behaving quite weirdly, like he's not behaving like himself, and I thought that was suspicious, but
I know you did, but like, because I'm a dumbass, I just thought he was scared. I just thought he was scared.
You know, like, when they received that piece of paper that said, like, choose your faces wisely, like, I thought, oh, that's what's happening.
Not me, though.
I really thought you got it.
I know, I just went in a different direction.
Yeah, like, I remember you specifically mentioned when they're in the park together, like, before they get, like, abducted by the angels and by the other angels and the demons, like, you're like, oh, look, like, Aziraphale is circling Crowley the same way that Crowley circles Aziraphale usually. And I was so worried that you'd figured it out.
Let me put this on the record. I didn't interpret them as swapping bodies. I thought it was that they had been together so long, they'd taken on each other's qualities.
That is a much better ending, I think.
Yeah, like, I interpret it as, like, because they had been friends for so long, because they have loved each other for so long, they had taken on each other's qualities, both in an emotional sense and a behavioral sense as well.
Like, manifested physically?
Yeah, like, but also in the sense that they've loved each other the way they have, like, in the way that they have they are also a different being physically, which is how I assumed they had survived the holy water and the hellfire.
Like, they'd evolved.
They'd evolved. Like, I assume their love for each other had made them evolve into something else, and that's why I'm low-key disappointed. Like, Neil Gaiman, if you're hearing this, like, I'm serious, man. Like, I was low-key disappointed that all they'd done was swap bodies. Like, but that's also very gay, because they're swapping bodies. But still, that's okay. But yeah, swapping bodies is still cool, though.
Yeah, there's that whole thing in episode 5 where Aziraphale, like, appears to Crowley as a ghost, like, in the bar.
Yeah, and he's like, pity, I can't,
go inside you.
That's so gay. Also, it's just, like, very gay to say that these two love each other so much that they can successfully impersonate one another to the point where no one notices, because no one else knows them better than they know each other. Like, they say the biggest sign of love is, like, understanding, you know? And, like, to understand someone, like, at that level is very romantic. Like, that idea of to understand someone is to love them, you know? I also, for the record, love how Crowley is a very awkward character, and he's not as suavey. I love, like, he's such an awkward bean. Like, he's not as suavey as you think he is, but, like, you know, when Az is doing the impression of him, he's, like, super suavey, so it works. Like, this, like, all that flirting, like, does work. Like, that's what makes it gayer, which is, like, one of the differences from the book, I think.
Yeah. Animals don't kill each other with clever machines, Angel. Only humans do that.
Crowley. Oh, good Lord.
What the deuce are you doing locked up in the Bastille?
So, next we wanted to talk about what Neil Gaiman has been saying outside of the show, like, as well as Michael Sheen's fan interactions.
I want you to go first on this, because I know you've got beef.
Not more than you, but, like, a thing that we wanted to look at was how this show has been promoted, and basically what the writers and actors have been saying. So Michael Sheen, who plays Aziraphale, has probably been the most notable advocate for Kraus.
Yeah, like, at one point, I'm pretty sure they were calling him, like, the fandom boyfriend. And like he was like, he tweeted to someone who was telling him this and was like, oh, that's okay as long as we all share the bill or something.
That just reminds me of when we used to call the popular celebrity crushes like internet boyfriends. Now we just call them like white boys of the month.
Michael Sheen was the white boy of the month when Good Omens came out. Like, I would say David Tennant was, but he's been the white boy of the month for a long time.
No, with David, it was more like everyone who crushed on him in Doctor Who kind of just resurfaced because it was like.
And what about it?
Relevant.
What about it?
Because he was like relevant again.
What about it? You got something to say? Want to say it to my face?
I just can't relate as a dyke. I just can't.
I understand. It's fine. I don't even think I can relate to myself with it sometimes. Anyway.
Like, yeah, Michael Sheen, with his level of fan interaction and like engagement, he's not really holding back. Like, I don't think he says it's gay, but he will say that they're in love, that they're husbands, like through his very public interactions on Twitter. Like, he's acknowledging it and, like, giving people that affirmation.
Yeah. He's, like, acknowledging that they're lovers and he talks about them being love. I can't think of a specific time where he said, you know, like, gay, like, where he specifically said the gay. Like, he's talking about it enough in an explicitly romantic sense that he doesn't need to. Like, not to mention he stated that he played the character in that way anyway.
Yeah, and then there's what Neil said.
So, as I was saying before, like, I do believe the show is written in a much more explicitly romantic way than the book, which I was really glad to see. Like, I've been following Neil Gaiman on Tumblr for as long as I've been on Tumblr. Like, I'm pretty sure it's one of the reasons I joined Tumblr in the first place. And, like, one of the cool things he does is, like, answer questions about his books and movies. Like, people always are asking him questions, and honestly, like, sometimes
it's cool of him to answer, though.
It is cool of him. Like, I'm actually, but I do have a fear we're going to John Green him one day, and he's just going to, like, get sick of it and run away. But someone asked him about Good Omens and whether, like, he supported his queer fans who could see themselves in Kraz regardless of how he wrote them as friends or partners. And he responded, quote unquote, absolutely, in brackets, and I wrote Aziraphale and Crowley as a love story in the TV version. Yes, he did say this. And I don't know, I think when he says love story in this context, he does mean it romantically. Like, Neil has, like, had many asks like this where he's talking about the way he wrote Az and Crowley. He has even defended his stance on writing them as more romantic in the show because a lot of people were like, but I interpret it this way. Like, and he was like, that's cool, you can do that, but this is how I wrote them in the show. So he's been talking about it a lot. Like, not to give more credit than anyone should give someone for saying the most basic things, but I think it's kind of good that he is talking about this and defending his take on them rather than doing the wishy-washy thing we know a lot of writers have done in the past, which is like, you can just do whatever you want, sunshine.
Yeah. Like, that's fair, but also I think we've come to my beef. Okay? Like,
yeah, I'm ready for your beef.
Like, yeah, he's saying all these great things, but he's saying them on his frickin' Tumblr. Technically, everyone can see it, but, like, realistically, only a very selective demographic of Good Omens' audience is going to read it. And, like, he's just doing it in a way that's very, like, safe and ambiguous. And, you know, one of the things we wanted to talk about is that Kraz is very much deliberately ambiguous, and this ambiguity is strategic.
Yeah, and, like, so your beef, really, is how useful is it for a director or a creator or, you know, a writer to confirm something outside of it actually being explicitly written. Like, how useful is it for them, like, to us?
Now, like, one thing is that it's very specifically done for clout. Like, this kind of thing where details about the story are revealed by its creator, like, outside of the actual text, is what's become known as word of God confirmation. I honestly wish it wasn't called that. Like, I prefer to call it pulling a J.K. Rowling, as she's probably the most infamous case of this phenomenon.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, this is done quite a lot in Good Omens, not to as bad a degree as HP, but, like, just, like, also just, it's not done, like, just in relation to Kraz, but also, it's in relation to genders of some of the other characters as well. Like, for instance, Pollution, who is one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, like, has been confirmed by Neil Gaiman outside of the show as being a non-binary character, which, like, I feel is a very tokenistic approach to representing trans and non-binary people. Like, it's kind of like they just sprinkled that in for, like, woke points.
Yes.
Like, without thinking about it too much. It's something that's not explicitly clear in the show, and it's something that can just very easily go over the audience's heads. Like, it's very ambiguous.
Yeah, like, and mostly in the show, God refers to pollution as they, but I think, doesn't God also refer to the other horsemen as they as well?
Yeah, like, even about God, like, who's voiced by Frances McDormand, like, people are going crazy that God had a woman's voice, and they were very much, like, patting themselves on the back for that, even though we don't really know God's gender either. But, like, back to pollution, though, like, it's quite a strange choice to select that character in particular to be the non-binary one. Like, why is it just pollution? And, like, because the four horsemen are supposed to be concepts, like death, war, famine, and pollution. They're not supposed to be people. They're embodiments of concepts.
Yeah, like, they're literally just manifestations of humanity's worst qualities. Like, why they need to have a gender at all, or be gendered, or not be gendered, is, like, makes no sense to me.
Yeah, so, like, why is it just pollution that's non-binary? Like, pollution is played by an actress of Filipino descent, Lois Faberes. Like, while I'm fairly certain that there's not much to it other than wanting to, you know, get that clout, like, for diversity, etc. Like, I think the implications of choosing the character that's played by an Asian woman, like, it's hard for me to ignore this, like, as a non-binary Asian lesbian. Like, in Western media, there is that stigma, not quite stigma, but, like, in the portrayal of Asian women, like, they're either, unfortunately, like, either hypersexualized due to fetishization, due to racism, or on the other end of the spectrum, they are asexualized because, like, they're not gender conforming enough for Western standards, which is also due to racism. Like, not just with fiction, we're seeing this a lot with how public figures are treated, like, most particularly athletes. So, like, especially when we take, like, another horseman, like War, into account, like, War is played by a white woman with, you know, she's got flowing red hair and she's just unmistakably feminine, but, like, still, you know, cool, like, in a leather jacket and stuff like that. So, like,
also, like, she gets, like, a much longer sequence as well, like, with the introduction.
Yeah, and they changed that from the book as well. Like, she's just...
In the book, she just, like, messes up some people in Italy, but for some reason...
Italy.
Yeah, but... like, in the movie, it has a weird... I don't know what the proper, like, Orientalist vibe, like, she, for some reason, like, all these random people are meeting up in Africa and she's just there, like...
I don't think that's Orientalism because it's Africa, but yeah.
Like, I don't...
Yeah, I get what you mean. Like,
It's,
yeah,
like,
on
very,
that level, yeah.
It's, like, on the level, that's probably not the right word, but it...
Yeah, just the fact that it's a white lady coming into this and, like, wreaking havoc, like, there's
probably, like, somewhere where they wanted, like, woke points for that, but honestly, I can't give it to them.
I feel like it backfired, and also just back to, in terms of, like, her gender presentation, it's like, why is it a white woman gets to have that kind of complexity in the representation, like, of the gender, while people of color are polarized instead?
Yeah, like, it's honestly just a lazy way to do non-binary representation. It's not even really non-binary representation because we don't know this thing, like, we don't know
from watching the show.
Just from watching the show, you wouldn't know that they are non-binary. And the horsemen, like I said, like, really aren't supposed to have genders anyway. So to assign a gender or no gender specifically is, like, it's really weird. Like, why?
Yeah, just, like...
The third of the four horsemen took over when Pestilence retired. They've had lots of interesting jobs in lots of interesting places. Helped design the petrol engine, plastics, and high-tech weed killers. They've killed as many people as famine or as war. This is pollution.
Speaking of non-binary representation and being agender, there's also what Neil Gaiman has said outside of the text regarding Aziraphale and Crowley.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay. Yeah, like, just to be clear, we're not upset at people who want to headcanon these characters as being agender or trans.
Like, other non-binary members of the audience who want to see themselves in Az and Crowley, like, we absolutely support that.
This is more about Neil Gaiman taking credit for something he didn't really do.
Yeah, like, the thing is, like, he's said on Twitter that essentially because Az and Crowley are not human, they are quote-unquote genderless.
The weird part is, like, for me, the weird part of this is that he seems to use this idea that, like, Az and Crowley have no gender to evade questions of them being specifically gay, which is a very odd thing to do. Like, them... Like them being genderless is it's fine as a concept, but it's most certainly not the way he wrote them in the book. I mean, throughout the entire book and the show, they are referred to by male pronouns, and they are specifically in the form of men. Like, they even picked cisgendered, like, men to play them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, I think the issue, again, is that people are crediting this now deleted tweet as, like, proof of non-binary representation when, like, absolutely no effort was put into it all. Like, the entire show, they look, behave, and are treated like cis men. They also, they refer to each other as he. Like, Crowley is described as Aziraphale's boyfriend in the dark glasses.
In the dark glasses, yeah. Like, these are two cis men playing them, like I said, so I don't think we can, with good conscience, credit Gaiman for that. Like, that's also the issue when there are points in the show where Aziraphale and Crowley are presented, like, in a non-masculine way as a joke.
Yeah, like, just because no one inside the screen laughs at it, like, doesn't mean it wasn't written for people outside of the screen to laugh. Like,
yeah, like, you know, the joke about Crowley being the nanny.
Yeah, and there's also that moment when Aziraphale, when he's inhabiting the body of Miranda Richardson's character.
Shout out to Miranda Richardson, though. We love you. Yeah. Like, she was so funny.
She really was.
But back to the your word of God thing.
Yeah.
Like, how much is it really worth it? It's so flimsily done, and it's just tokenistic. Gaiman is not saying it in any way that's meaningful.
Yeah.
Like, whether they're genderless or not is not as important to the story they're trying to tell. Like, it's very much just for these points. Well, I'm aware that they're a genderless gender. I'm cool. I know that
there are genderless genders.
Yeah, I know that there are genderless genders, guys.
No, but, like, obviously, again, if you interpret the characters that way, that's great. Like, I wish I could see them that way myself, but I just simply can't. Like, but I do understand, like, if this is something you feel strongly about as a trans non-binary person, like, this kind of validation and acknowledgement, like, from a creator of a text you enjoy, like, can feel good. But
absolutely,
like, I just implore you to not be satisfied by this, basically. Like, I want you to want more than this bare minimum, because we absolutely deserve more.
Yes. Like, but all that just brings us back to the strategic ambiguity where they, like, entertain the idea enough for some LGBT fans to be satisfied with what they've been given. Like, in my head, what I've called it for a long time is throwing you a bone and calling it a feast.
That's a really good phrase. When we were first writing this, we actually had the working title of Schrodinger's Gays.
Yes.
Because it's very much like they are if you want them to be, but they aren't if you don't.
It's something that's flown under the radar.
Yeah, like, especially because with media that is explicitly gay, like, it's very difficult for it to be labelled with anything other than it being gay.
Literally the bisexual.
No, she chose to call it the bisexual, so in this case, that's not an example. But we love you, Desiree.
Yeah, we love you, Desiree Akavan.
No, but I mean more like for instance, like when Xavier Dolan premiered his most recent film, Matthias and Maxime, at Cannes. Like, he talked about how there was a double standard, like, where his film was being lauded as a gay film and not just, like, as a romance. Like, he said something like, you don't hear people say things like, oh, I saw a really good heterosexual film the other day.
Do those exist?
Yeah, probably because they don't exist. Good heterosexual movies don't exist, except that one made by Gregor Araki. But, like, back to Good Omens, if it was, like, even if it was, like, the slightest bit explicit, like, if they, for instance, like, kissed at any point on screen, it would be, like, automatically labeled as gay TV. Like, it would be undeniable, and, you know, we wouldn't be making this episode.
That's very sad. Like, there's nothing in the show that makes it undeniable. Like, it's very easy to deny. Like, it goes over people's heads. I've talked to other adults in my life who've watched Good Omens, and they've disagreed with me on thinking that it's gay, and I can't even concretely argue with them and say that they're wrong, because there's nothing in the text that can make me concretely go, well, it is.
Yeah, and then there are, of course, like, those fans who have asked Neil, like, is it okay if I don't want to see them as gay? And he says it's okay for them, like, if they want to ignore it. So, like...
But this brings us back to whether the ambiguity is a good thing and whether that's fair to LGBT people in the audience.
No, yeah, because like despite all these things that Gaiman and the actors have been saying about it, like in the show it is very deliberately written as ambiguous. This is done in order to appeal to the many fans who have interpreted them as gay like these past 30 years, like without also not disgruntling the many conservative homophobic people in the audience.
Yeah, because when you write this way, it allows them to appeal to a much wider audience, a much wider market, and therefore achieve the main goal in any commercial production in this capitalist hell society we live in, which is to make as much money as possible.
Yeah, just to make as much money as possible. So, like, while we can and have been arguing that what we're presented with is gay, like, we can't actually ignore this narrative of subtlety and ambiguity that was clearly driven like for financial advantage, because ultimately to value the opinions of homophobic audiences and to strive for their endorsement of your art, like rather than make like a powerful undeniable representation of gay love, like it's cowardly.
It's like resigning. Yeah, it's cowardly. It's totally cowardly to resign the romance of your story to what basically amounts to an inside joke for fans who know better, while still leaving it open for bigots to ignore and invalidate. Like, I'm sorry, but that's cowardly.
Yeah, and like, not that it has to be radical, but like, it is truly the most boring thing you could have done.
Hello, Aziraphale.
Oh, Michael, Uriel. Sandalphon. Hello,
We've just been learning some rather disturbing things about you. You've been a bit of a fallen angel, haven't you? Consorting with the enemy.
Oh, I haven't been consorting.
Don't think your boyfriend in the dark glasses will get you special treatment in hell.
Do you ever think about how this is 2019? We're nearly in a new decade, the Roaring 20s 2.0. And we still can't just say things.
Yeah, like the novel came out like 30 years ago.
Good Omens is actually one of the first texts, like in the early days of the internet, that had what we know today as like fandom.
Yeah, it was one of like the first times that a text was engaged with in this way, like at this level, that we're still consuming at today, like on the internet, like 30 years from then, and we can't even get much more than that.
Even though, like, it's crazy to me, like we're literally seeing it, like visually. Like this is not a book that your mum has in her bookshelf anymore. Like this is literally something we're seeing visually now, and it's still not there. Like
right in front of you. Like there's no room for other interpretation. Well, there's less room for interpretation.
Yeah, like all this extra stuff. Like even with Hard Times, which we do love, it's still not gay enough. Like it's really rude almost. Like for me, I think it's rude to include so much subtext, like so much mocking from the angels, especially the angels, like, oh, is your boyfriend with the glasses going to save you? Like they literally use the suffering of homophobia as a trope to get the audience, to get the audience to root for them more, but still don't even have the guts to actually say they're gay.
Yeah, like the source novel is like 30% homophobic jokes, like maybe borderline homophobic, but when it's like to that extent, like it is straight up, I think.
Yeah.
So like it is a letdown for there to be no payoff from that. Like even 30 years later, when Gaiman as a writer is supposed to have, learned better by now.
I want to be an optimist, like that maybe Neil wanted to do that, but like there is a lot more constraints with this being television, with this being Amazon. Like I really don't want to run into the trap of that whole showrunner trap of like, he is the person responsible for what has befallen us, because it's not just him, obviously.
Like, I mean, we can look at like, some of his more recent work where he definitely has improved like in these aspects as well. But like, so like, because there's many factors obviously that have contributed to this ambiguity, but like 30 years later and that's still disappointing, and it's just not fair to do it like this. Like, no. It's not fair to really engage with fans outside of the text in this way, but to not care enough about us to actually make that statement, like in the actual text, like to make it undeniable. Like we love Kraz, but it's something that can very easily be taken away from us.
Yeah, like with all this stuff that Neil Gaiman's been saying on Twitter, on like social media, like he could have just as easily been like, oh, that's nice, like when people tweeted about them being gay or whatever. Like they could have gone down the path of two other head writers that we won't name.
The S word.
The S word.
Like,
they could have easily gone in that direction. Like, he really could have easily gone in that same direction as those two. But he
would have been just as valid.
Yes,
Yeah.
like, he would have, like, it would have been just, like, him being homophobic and saying it's not true, but he didn't, but that's just still not enough. It's not enough to just support those readings of the text. If you truly want to support them, you should actually put it in there, you know? At the end of the day, as hard as it's a hard pill to swallow, but at the end of the day, like, something like Good Omens is obviously, like, it's not made for us. It's made for the biggest audience that it can find.
Yeah, it's not for us, it's for everyone.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if you want something to be for everyone, it has to appeal to everyone in that horrible way, because
you wish to sell in as many countries
homophobia
as
is a
possible.
very easy joke for a lot of
And
people
all
to
the
have.
kingdoms thereof.
That's a sad note to end on. Like,
We love Good Omens, actually, obviously, but
well, we're also firm believers in being critical. Like, I think to love something is to criticize it. Like, when it comes to media,
you can't really love something without knowing it and criticizing it. Like, nothing's totally perfect unless maybe you make it yourself.
But even then, I think if I made something, I'd possibly do something problematic without realizing, just because everyone's got vices that they don't realize. Everyone's got biases and things that they're not aware of.
Yeah, also you're writing like as a bisexual woman of color, and not everyone is going to read your work the way you intend, because not everyone is a bisexual woman of color.
Unfortunately.
Like, yeah, and the thing is that we're not straight white men like Neil Gaiman and probably like a lot of the people who are pulling the strings at Amazon. So, like, that's why we read it differently.
But I do think, no matter who you are, to watch that scene, you know the scene, you go too far.
My face is on the floor.
Oh yes, let it be noted, her face is on the floor. We are technically just on the floor though to record this, so we're already on the floor. We're flawed.
Don't expose us.
Like, but you know, you go too fast for me, Crowley.
Yeah.
Like, that
Just
scene
hits you like a truck. Yeah, also, just like the whole episode, Hard Times. It's just like, yeah, obviously it's the only thing that we've mentioned so far, but it really is like that good. Like, just also I love that they have that whole, like, it's not really a montage. It's just
No, but
they have that whole
they have
that whole recap, like that whole previously on Kraz, and then it plays the opening sequence theme song like 30 minutes into the episode. It's like thank you so much.
Like, we forgot we were
like
watching.
I almost forgot what show I was watching. Like, if you hadn't put that in.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy that sequence like was basically nominated for a Golden Globe because of the costumes.
An Emmy for the costuming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that scene was that episode, they submitted that episode to the Emmys for outstanding costume design in a sci-fi or fantasy. If for those who don't know me, I'm really obsessed with costume design.
Yes.
So, like, I just really love the detail in that whole episode. Just like throughout the era, but also there's the things that are unique to them as well. Like for instance, like the pins that they wear, and like as we mentioned earlier, like Crowley has like a different he has a different pair of glasses like each era, and like just
and a
the
different
detail in
wig.
that.
Wig.
All of them are terrible though.
Yeah, all of them are bad. Like,
but, they
David
didn't
Tennant
submit for
David Tennant
makeup and
doesn't
hairstyling.
do good with red hair. Like, I mean, it works for Crowley, but not for him, if that makes sense.
Not for like even David Tennant. Like, obviously this is a novel that's been out for like 30 years. So like I love seeing, because of the show there's been a resurgence, and I love seeing like people like still like refusing to accept David Tennant and Michael Sheen as Kraz. Like they're still using their own who they think they're still using like their own like interpretations of the characters. Like, I love seeing art of them like as people of color. Yeah.
No one tops our fan cast though.
Yes, our dream cast of Az and Crowley is Billy Porter as Aziraphale.
And Naveen Andrews.
Naveen Andrews as Crowley.
As Crowley. Oh my goodness.
I mostly say that because I want Naveen Andrews to do something.
I was in an op shop the other day, and the only DVD, there was like a whole shelf of DVDs that were just lost. Like,
Yeah.
So much handsomeness and talent.
Well, don't look so disappointed. Perhaps one day we could, I don't know, go for a picnic. Dine at the Ritz.
I'll give you a lift. Anywhere you want to go.
You go too fast for me, Crowley.
Also, just, you know, we do have to say as Wallowa, as WLW, as women.
Yeah, as women loving women.
Women aligned. People who love women. Like
Yes.
Anathema and Adria Arjona. She's so beautiful.
She's like, do you remember when I was watching it with you and for the first time, and I literally just kept saying every time I was like, that's the most beautiful person I've ever seen.
She's just so lovely.
She's so beautiful. Like, wow. Yeah. Imagine just walking around, like looking like, I don't know how to say her name. Like, I'm really bad.
Adria Arjona.
Adria.
I think that's how you say it. I don't know. Sorry.
But imagine just walking around looking like Adria Arjona. Like, imagine just doing that. Imagine what that would be like.
I wouldn't know how to act. So
I mean, I think that's part of the reason why I actually find the romance between Anathema and
oh my god, that was the worst.
It's like
this is another point.
Yeah.
This whole stupid show like actually still pulls the whole Anathema mute romance. I say as I do air quotes really exaggeratedly. Like Anathema is just the coolest person alive, and then you have Jack Whitehall. Like, I think Jack Whitehall is funny, but also I do think he was a bit weird as Newt in this as well, I think.
I can't really think of anything I've seen him in other than this, so I don't have the previous...
I mean, I guess maybe because he's been a bit typecast, so this was actually breaking out from that, but, like, still, like, Anathema is, like, the coolest woman alive.
She really is.
Then you have this, and she's supposed to just want to bang this dude in a hurricane.
Yeah, I don't...
Not in a hurricane, but, like, in the apocalypse happening right outside their door.
I don't ship Anathema and Newt.
It's really, no.
Like,
There's nothing there.
No.
It's literally, like, she's just reading the prophecy, and it's like, it tells her to.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
That's, like, my new way. I should just tell people to, like, tell people to hook up with me.
It's
like,
known.
It is known.
Like, my great-grandmother said so.
My great-grandmother said we should bang. So we should bang.
It's the heteronormativity.
It's the heteronormativity, but Kraz, like, can I just, like, something I really love that did come across from the book to the show is, like, how, like, they're very tender, like, Kraz in the show. Yeah. Like, I don't know why it gets me a lot, but the scene where, like, they're sitting at the bus stop and, like, Aziraphale goes, like, oh, I'm going to go back to the bookshop, and he's like, it burnt down. Like, he's, like, so, his voice is so soft. He's, like...
He knows, like, how sad he would be, so he's sad for him, because he doesn't... Oh, that's another thing. Taking on each other's qualities, like, that's some intertextual evidence for you. Basically, so we do love them, like, obviously, but, like, we just want more than this. Like, we don't hate anybody.
No.
We do hate Amazon, though.
We do hate Amazon. But back to Good Omens. It is important and valuable, I think, for people like us to criticize the art of straight white men, so it can hopefully improve.
Yeah, and, like, not that we want to rely on straight white men to say these things for us in their art, like, which is why we actually want our next episode to be about LGBT artists.
Yeah, we're going to discuss our favorite LGBT filmmakers and writers of color. We mentioned our girl Durr-e Adan earlier, so there will be a lot about her.
Yeah.
Get ready for that. Homework is watch the bisexual
on it's on Stan.
Yes,
if you're in Australia.
If you're in Australia,
it's on. I think it's on Hulu in America.
Is it? Oh,
yeah, and it's like a Channel 4 thing in UK. Yeah.
Or if you can't
Please watch
that,
the bisexual.
Stream appropriate behavior.
Yeah, or the Miseducation of Cameron Post.
Yes, or the Miseducation of Cameron Post.
So just.
Yeah, but we're going to be talking about our favourite LGBT filmmakers like Desiree and the importance of telling our own stories. Yeah, so... Yeah. Thank you for listening. I'm excited. I'm very excited. Thank you for listening to our inaugural episode of GayV Club. I'm very proud of us that we finally did this.
Yay.
We're hoping to do GayV Club fortnightly, so please subscribe, rate, or leave a nice review for us on whichever platform you listen to podcasts on.
Yes, please.
Because that would be really encouraging for us to continue, because we're uni students living in 2 different cities who want to make this work.
I drove 2 hours to come here.
Yeah, thank you. I love that you came all the way here.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, follow us please on Twitter and Instagram at GayV_club. Where we'll be posting updates on future episodes. You can also find us individually on almost every social media platform. Mary's username is aka just Merry. Merry is spelled Merry. Yeah, and I'm on Twitter at Durr-e Haque, so that's spelled Deahaque. Also, a very big thank you to my friend Xavier Emerson, who designed our beautiful logo for us. You can see more of their graphic design work on behance.net/bethecowboy, which is a great username.
It is.
And,
that is awesome.
Yeah, or on Twitter at happyasxavier. So thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully you can tune in again in 2 weeks.
See you next time, or hear you next time.
Yes.
Bye.
Hear us next time. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. To the world.
To the world.